Hello. Well, look, I don't have a prepared statement or anything like that. I just thought it would be good to be able to offer you all an opportunity to kind of follow up from today's events or possibly yesterday's events. But I just wanted to kind of kick off by saying that climate march outside is larger than what we saw leading up to the 2015 Paris Agreement. And so it is really significant, I think, that these kids have essentially taken a risk by taking time off work to stand up for what they believe in and stand up for their own futures. And regardless of what you think, you've got to admire them for that.
Can you tell us yesterday how the events unfolded when you were walking to work?
This is going to be pretty frustrating for you, Barry, but I actually can't because it's now before the courts, and so I can't actually walk through what happened yesterday.
Can you at least tell us whether you believe that he knew who you were?
He did know who I was.
James,
yeah.
do you believe it was a politically motivated attack?
Again, look, I can't speak to the motivations simply because it is before the courts at the moment. Sorry.
Was he yelling out about the United Nations?
Again, I can't talk through what actually happened at the event just because that becomes part of the court process.
Can you run us through how you're feeling and how you felt kind of before, during, after?
Sure. So, look, I feel fine. I have a bit of a sore head, and a lot of people have these kinds of incidents occur and come off a lot worse than I do. I have to say, my wife, my family, and the staff here at the office were all quite shaken up by it, probably more than I was, to tell you the truth, because I knew how I was, but they didn't. And so I do want to acknowledge that actually, my family and my team were actually pretty shaken up by it. And I'm upset about that.
What made you think about security?
Sorry.
Can you tell us what the extent of your injuries are?
Well, I have a black eye. I also have, as it subsequently transpires, I've got a small fracture in the bone of my eye socket, so that doesn't, I don't have any kind of loss of vision or anything like that, but it is just something to be a bit careful about. So no head banging.
Is there any risk of concussion?
Sorry?
Is there any risk of concussion?
There's always a risk with a head injury of concussion. I haven't exhibited any signs of it, but people around me have been told to monitor any unusual symptoms.
Do you think that security should be stepped up around politicians as a result of this?
Look, I think it's too early. This is one incident, right? And I know that there are other incidents in history of politicians being attacked, but I don't think that we should change our procedures just based on one incident. And I do think that one of the great things about New Zealand's political culture is that for the most part we are open and accessible. I like being open and accessible. I like the fact that I can walk to work, and I intend to keep doing so.
You're a party leader of you've got several MPs in your party. What would you be telling them about their own security and their safety, to maybe think differently about your responsibilities there?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. Some of our MPs, particularly Martimer and Golriz, get quite a lot of death threats and quite a lot of really violent sort of social media directed towards them. And so I have been worried for their safety far more than for my own. And so my advice in those situations has always been to engage with DPS and with the police. And to take their guidance.
Will you be taking any extra precautions now that after this has happened?
I haven't worked through that yet. I walked to work this morning with Annabelle, but yeah, like I said, this was an incident, and at the moment I'm going to stick with my routine.
Do you feel safe?
Well, broadly speaking, yes, and we live in a society where these things do happen. I have always tried to live my life like in the knowledge that kind of thing can happen, but not letting that dominate my choices.
Sorry, have you been surprised by the reaction of the public?
I have to say I've been really touched by the hundreds of messages of support that Annabelle and I and the team in the Greens and here at Parliament have had over the last 24 hours. It's I wasn't anticipating that, and I've had messages of support from all over New Zealand and in fact all over the world, and it's, you know, it's lovely when you're going through something like that to know that's out there. I just hope that other people who are, you know, victims of violence get the same support.
What about the people who came to your aid? Can you talk us through their actions and how you feel about them?
Look, I can't talk through what they did, but there was a couple who intervened in the middle of the incident and who were incredibly supportive, rang for the ambulance and for the police car, and I'm very, very grateful for their...
Do you see that they were brave?
Yes, they were brave, and when I can talk about what actually happened, I'll specify how.
As well as being hit in the head, were you knocked to the ground and kicked?
Again, I can't talk through the details of what actually happened just while it's in front of the courts.
Have you received any threats recently which could relate to this?
Not that I know of, no.
Jane, can you just speak us through, out there you said the Zero Carbon Act would be passed in 2019. It was supposed to be introduced last October, so this is the second promise on this. Can you just guarantee at third reading will pass?
Look, every single party has said that they want it passed this year. They don't want to be dealing with it next year. Yeah.
I just wonder,
Will it heal itself, or do you think you're going to need surgery?
I've got to do a follow-up check, but the initial advice that I've had is that it is likely to heal by itself, and I'm not going to need a sling.
You mentioned that the man knew you. Did you know him prior to this?
He looked vaguely familiar, but I wouldn't say that I knew him.
could you place him?
No.
But he looked familiar.
You've got a fracture in your bone there, and
That's
any
right.
other injuries? You had some scrapes on your wrist, I think.
Oh, it's just minor. I have a. This is going to answer your previous question, but when I fell to the ground, I scraped my wrist as well.
Okay, and can you just walk us through your morning routine? Is it like, I mean, you walk
In
into
how
work-
much detail?
Yeah.
What time?
Yeah. Where? Yeah.
How far of a walk is it? Do you walk every morning into Parliament?
It's about a 20-minute walk, and I, when the weather permits, and when I don't have cabinet papers to lug down the hill, then I walk.
And you usually listen to music?
That's a recent occurrence.
And is that, I mean, as far as awareness of your surroundings, is that something you'd do differently, not listen to music when you're walking?
I heard this person over the music.
Can you tell us what you were listening to?
You know what? I'd have to go back and check. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Are you hating on any of the details? Did you black it out at all, or was it anything like that?
No, I didn't.
And,
Yeah.
Just to clarify, sorry, you knew who this guy was?
No, I didn't.
But he looked familiar to
Yeah.
you? From what you know?
I don't know.
Did Annabelle walk with you because she was worried about you today?
No, Annabelle and I walk together some mornings. It depends on her work schedule.
Right, so yesterday she could have been with you on any other day, like...
Possibly, yes. Yeah.
And you're feeling up to being back at work?
Yeah, well, I was up to feeling back at work fairly shortly after the incident, but it transpired that I was in worse shape than I thought I was, and so that's why I then kind of went to the hospital to get some checkups. But no, I've had a good rest, and I'm feeling pretty good.
What are the doctors telling you?
Have a good rest, and look after myself. I'm on a course of antibiotics and some painkillers, but other than that, they're not really anticipating, anything significant afterwards.
Did the person jump out of the van, jump back into the van afterwards? Can you talk about that a little?
Come on. No, look, I can't talk about the incident in any detail. He did drive off at the end of it, however. Yeah.
Some of the children today were saying that they want the zero carbon bill. I think they even said zero carbon act now. They want it now, not even by the end of the year. How does that make you feel?
Who can blame them? Who can blame them? I mean, we want this thing done, and we also want to ensure that it is a piece of legislation that has the support of the government of the day. And we know that dealing with climate change is going to get more difficult in the future than it is today. And it turns out bloody hard to deal with it today.
So is there a risk in terms of getting out the supply
when it'll be watered down to the extent that those young people we don't have.
So one of the reasons why it's taking longer than it is because I'm not prepared to compromise it any further, right? So we know that we have to live within that threshold of 1.5 degrees of global warming, and we have to make sure that the bill reflects that. And so that's what we're working on.
So what's the snag here? Is it New Zealand first?
Well, no, the snag is that we're trying to create cross-party consensus on an incredibly complex piece of legislation that has a 30-year time frame and has to survive 3 or 4 or 5 changes of government. I mean, it is just simply that complex.
New Zealand first, that their coalition agreement got a exception for part of the ETS for agriculture. Is that in any way going to change this term of art? That exception for
No,
agriculture?
no, it's not.
Will you enlist Annabelle to work for the foreseeable?
On the days where it lines up with her work schedule. Yeah, she works out more than I do.
Will you be varying the route that you take to work?
No, and part of that is because actually it's quite a direct route, and if I went more indirectly, it'd take me an hour. So.
Some of the crowd also asked some pretty pointed questions about the exploration ban.
Yeah.
What did that make you feel? That they, from what I could hear, they basically want no more drilling, no more pumping right now.
Well, and that is completely understandable when you live in their context, which is that the decisions that we're making today dramatically affect the circumstances that they're going to live in. I mean, the Zero Carbon Act has got a target for 2050. I'm going to be 77 in the year 2050, but they will all be mid-career. They'll probably have kids of their own. They'll be worried about their kids' world. The circumstances that they're going to be living in are going to be dramatically changed from today. So you can understand their impatience. I completely get that.
Is it worth it to miss a day of school for this, do you think?
I absolutely. Look, I've said this before. I think that adults who kind of say, you should be doing this on weekends or outside of school hours, or who think that you shouldn't be doing it all, I think it's condescending for us as adults to say whether they should or should not be participating in this, given that their entire point is that adults have actually consistently failed over the last 30 years to deal with climate change, right? So the idea that we would then define the terms of that debate with them, I just think is extraordinarily condescending. And so I've said, I'm not encouraging anyone to participate or not to participate. That's not my choice, that's their choice. I think that they're placing something at risk for themselves by, being marked truant for the day in some circumstances, any consequences that come with that for them. And what they're saying is, no, that's worth it. They, is that they're fighting for their futures. And frankly, it wouldn't be a strike if they were out on a weekend. That's the point. And as somebody very articulately said, there are adults who strike all the time, as it turns out, over paying conditions and so on, and they do that by taking time off work to do so. They're just reflecting the behaviour that they see from their parents.
Labour National and the Greens all had an MP there speaking, constitutional MP. New Zealand First, they don't be disappointed about that at all?
Look, I don't know what the circumstances were that led to that. I simply responded to an invitation that I received. We didn't coordinate between the parties about who was going to be there and who wasn't, so you'd have to ask that question of the organisers.
Back on the attack, did you hit him back?
So as it turns out, I can't really talk about the details of the incident while it's before the courts.
Do you think today perhaps is an example of why we should reconsider the voting age?
Well, actually, yes, I do. I mean, when Scotland had its independence referendum, they extended the vote to 16 and 17-year-olds, and that was because they knew that decision would far more affect the lives of those people than it would of people at the, should we say, the other end of the age range. And I think when it comes to climate change and what's going on over the course of the next 30 years, yes, I actually do think that young people, it's clear that young people want to participate in the political process, right? That's really what today is an expression of. So I think it's worth considering.
Would you like to see it 16, 14?
Oh, look, again, what I'm saying is it's worth considering. So, we haven't considered it yet. There are a couple of people who have floated proposals. We haven't engaged with it, but I do think it is worth considering.
Where do you think it could land, though?
I have no idea where it would.
16 be a good...
I honestly don't know where it would land, but I think it's worth the conversation.
Is there a degree of cynicism there? Because you'd probably pick up a fair share of those votes out there, would
No, look, this is, to tell you what, knowing the way things work around here, by the time that decision gets made, I probably won't be here anymore. All right, thanks very much. See you later.
Thanks.